I'm so excited about this last book, which makes me think it was probably, I need to say it with my chest, like this was the best book that I read in 2024, and this book is Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Amin here, and I am making part 2 of this series where I talk you through books that I read in 2024, and today we're going to be talking about all of my favorite books that I read. There is a part 1 to this video where I went through the books that I did not enjoy, so the worst books that I read in 2024, and if you watch that one, you know I'm pretty opinionated. I try to read books that are not real, like nonfiction, because I read to kind of get away from real life in a way, so I don't want to be reading things that happened in real life, and I also don't want to be reading sad things. So if you have any suggestions for books that I would like based on what you're about to hear, please let me know down below in the comments. And I'm going to talk you through 11 books, so my top 11 books of 2024. As I mentioned in part 1 of the video, I rank everything out of 5 stars, and I will give like half stars, quarter stars. I even give like 0.9s of a star. When I think about all these ratings, I make it into a percentage system. So like, for example, a 4 stars to 80%, like it was a good enough. And then obviously 5 stars means 100% amazing, no notes. I only have 4 5-star books that I read in 2024. So number 11 book I gave 4.5 stars to is called Mad Honey by Jodi Picoult and Jennifer Finney Boylan. And this book was recommended to me, and a lot of people really like it, and it was really good. It's about 2 people that are like very close, like falling in love, and then one of them dies. And it's kind of like going back in time to the history of that person and like everything they've been through in life, the person that has died. And the twist that's in there shook me to my core. Like, if you watch part 1, you know that I hate reading a book and kind of expecting everything, even though in like romance, that's separate. We know what's gonna happen in romance, but I still wanna read it. But this twist, so good. I'm actually reading another Jodi Picoult book right now, which I'm loving as well. It's called By Any Other Name. I don't think I'll be able to finish it in 2024, so it will be probably the first book that I'll finish in 2025, but I really liked Mad Honey, so I would recommend it to anybody. Number 10 is a book that I also gave 4.5 stars to, and it's called None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. And Lisa Jewell basically does books that are like suspense thriller type books, and this one essentially is about a podcast host, and she meets somebody who is like very intriguing and kind of invites her to the podcast, and that person is telling like their life story, but it kind of like their lives get too intertwined to the point where the podcast host starts discovering all these secrets and lies. There are some twists in there. Some were predictable, some were not predictable, but it was very well written. Like it's a kind of book that you could kind of finish within one sitting if you wanted to, and I think I finished it over like maybe 2 days. So it was very intriguing. I've read other Lisa Jewell books, and this is definitely one of her top books, so I would recommend for anybody that's looking for kind of a suspense, like sitting on the edge of your seat type. Okay, then we have the next book that I give 4.5 stars to, which is called Horse by Geraldine Brooks, and this sounds like a book that I wouldn't be into. It's basically about a racehorse in the 1800s in the States, in Kentucky, and essentially the life of the horse, of course, but then also the individuals that are caring for the horse. It does touch on the aspects of slavery and who's really caring for the horse versus the owners. It goes through 2 different time periods. So one is in the 1800s experience of that person, and then also in, I think it's like 2022 or 2023, the individual's experience in the kind of modern day times. And usually I'm not like a super fan of books like that, but it was very well written. You could tell there was a lot of research done in terms of the writing of the book, and I again never thought I would be into a book about racehorses, but it was really good. Like, it was very well written. There were some points of it, I mentioned this in part 1 of the video as well, like books that are about like race and injustice and equality and privilege and all of these very heavy topics. There's like a very fine line between them being well written versus kind of like feeling like the story, it has to like live up to a very high standard for me personally to enjoy it. And this one was like kind of at the cusp of like, it almost could have been a 5 stars, but there were some parts of the story where I was like, like that, like maybe wasn't the best choice in terms of like the sequence of events or the way it was written and stuff like that. But it was a very good fiction, almost real, kind of, is that what you call historical fiction? I feel like it was an historical fiction book, and again, like got me out of my comfort zone because I never would have picked something like that. And a lot of people on Goodreads really liked it, 4.27 stars. So I gave it a 4.5, like pretty much on average. So it's another book that I definitely would recommend to anyone that's looking for something kind of new and outside of their comfort zone. Oh yes, okay. So the next book I gave 4.75 stars to, and for all of you haters that think I hate romance, this one's for you, by Rebecca Yarros, who is the writer of Fourth Wing, which I also read, but it wasn't great enough for me to mention in my top favorite books, and it wasn't bad enough for me to mention. So it's kind of like a mediocre book. Anyways, this is not about that book. This is about the things we leave unfinished. So this book is a romance. It's a historical fiction. Again, it kind of goes between retelling a story of like a family and like kind of like the grandmother's story, and then also like the granddaughter's story, who's like modern times versus like the war times. And it's essentially a love story, but not 100% a love story, because like it again goes through the two different time periods. The twist in this book, oh my god. So clearly I like books that have twists that are unpredictable, because I did not predict this twist. It was so freaking good. Yeah, anyways, I have nothing else to say about this book. If you're interested in historical fiction and romance and, you know, all the good things, there are some steamy scenes in here, but the steamy scenes are done well, like they're not cringe. Sometimes they can be cringe, again, a very fine line. The next book that I gave 4.75 stars to is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. And this book is very highly rated on Goodreads. It's 4.49 stars. And it was written so well. It's from the perspective of the main character, whose name is Demon, and it kind of follows him throughout his life and all the difficulties that he has to endure, essentially from the moment that he was born. And it's very well written. Again, like, it's very raw, and sometimes, again, raw has a very thin line. Like, if you watch part one, A Little Life is very raw. It's like too raw to the point where it wasn't enjoyable. And Demon is also kind of like a sad story, but there's moments where I was laughing or smiling. I don't really laugh out loud. There were moments that I actually cried in the book, and it was just like you get really attached to the characters. I would definitely want to read more books actually by this author now that I'm thinking about it. The best romance book that I read in 2024 is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. And this book was so good. I gave it 4.75 stars. And with this book, essentially, there is obviously that romance that's like, you know, the main focal point of the story, but there's also other things happening in the background. It happens between two time periods again, but it's the same person time traveling, which I never thought I would be like into time travel books, and I'm not, but like the idea of the story is so unique, and the way it was written is so wonderfully done. The characters are lovable, you're rooting for them, and of course, like, it is predictable, like in the way that all romance books are, but it wasn't cringy, which is so hard to do because a lot of romance is so cringy, and I love romance, like I'm a sucker for it, but I don't want to be like rolling my eyes, you know, at the scenes. Another 4.75 stars I gave to A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza. And the way this book wrecked me, guys, like, I found it very relatable because it does talk about like life as, in this case, like a first generation American. I'm first generation Canadian, and so it talks about like the perspectives of like the immigrant parents versus the children, how the children are so different. So it follows a family, so obviously there's the parents and then there's 3 kids, and kind of the trajectory that the life takes for all 3 children. Like, every time I think back to this book, I feel like it was a movie, and maybe I don't know, maybe one day it will be made into a movie, but it just like tugged at all of the heartstrings, and it was so relatable and so interesting. I learned a lot about the Muslim religion, which I didn't know about as well. So there are like so many unique aspects to this book, and it was written so, again, rawly, like so raw to the point where it made me think about things that I never even considered or thought about before. And I cried multiple times throughout the book. Like, maybe that is because of like my own experiences and stuff like that, but it was just very, very well written. Has 4.17 stars on Goodreads, and I can see people like really, really liked it. It's one of those books that will probably stay with me forever. We are now in top 5 territory. And these are in no particular order. I don't have a favorite book. I don't have a favorite book that I read this year, but there are some that I could not stop talking about. I gave 5 stars to And Then They Were None by Agatha Christie. And this is obviously a classic. I have never read an Agatha Christie book before, so I didn't know exactly what to expect, but it was like a suspense, murder mystery, thriller, and I ripped through this. It was an easy read, like it was short. What the story essentially is a bunch of strangers get invited to this island, and one by one, everybody starts dying. And so you're kind of like on your toes, like trying to figure out like who is the killer and who's left. And it was very, very quick to read, and the suspense and the twists were mind-boggling. It kind of like goes into like every single person's story, and you're just like literally on the edge of your seat trying to figure out who is the guilty person, but they're all actually guilty in different ways. I don't know how to explain it, but it's a very good book. Obviously high rating, 4.28 on Goodreads. I have another Lisa Jewell book that I put in this video, and this is a 5-star book. This is called Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell, and essentially this story following the experience of a mother whose daughter was missing, like she was kidnapped, taken away, missing, and the mother obviously becomes like very obsessed with figuring out like what happened to her, and it kind of like follows that journey. And there were like twists, obviously, as you would expect, and some of the twists I was able to predict, but I ripped through this book. Like, I'm pretty sure I read it in probably less than 1 or 2 days. The psychological suspense and the way the characters were developed, it was so creepy, but it was so good. Definitely my favorite Lisa Jewell book, hands down. And obviously she's had honorable mention twice in this video. This one, now that I'm looking at it on Goodreads, 4.05 stars is what it is, which is not as high as what you would expect, but I loved it. Maybe because it was just fast paced, like I didn't really think too hard about like the actual writing style or the content or anything like that, but the way I felt after reading it, I could not stop thinking about it, and to me, that means 5 stars. Second last book, which is one of the ones that I just finished reading like a few weeks ago, and it's Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. And again, I never thought I would get into a book that has to do with like fantasy. Like I'm just not really that kind of person, or I never thought I was. Maybe I am limiting myself and putting myself in boxes when I shouldn't be, because this book, like no notes, 0. It was so freaking good. It is a love story. I think they call it romantasy. Like I'm getting into this world. I don't have TikTok, so I don't know what, you know, trendy things there are happening out there. But this book essentially is about these 2 people. They're both like writers, and they're both enemies. Like it's kind of like enemies to lovers. Yeah, it is enemies to lovers, but it's like this fantasy world, but it's not like too fantasy. It's not like Fourth Wing where I have to like learn all of these new words and all of these new like I don't know, like it's just a lot of learning to do in something like Fourth Wing, but this one was pretty easy to follow along with. And there was a cliffhanger at the end, and I don't mind a cliffhanger. There is a part 2, which I will be reading in 2025. The part 2 is not highly rated, so I am worried that it will taint my view of part 1. But now that I'm putting this on the internet, you all know that I love part 1, and part 2 is not going to change that for me. I hope that it will be great, but I don't really know. On Goodreads, Divine Rivals, which is part 1, has 4.17 stars. And so we'll just see part 2, what it looks like. If you've read part 2, let me know what you guys think. I'm gonna read it, so I'm gonna hopefully like have my own opinion about it before reading into anybody else's. I'm so excited about this last book, which makes me think it was probably, I need to say it with my chest, like this was the best book that I read in 2024, and this book is Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee, and I gave it a 5 stars, obviously. I was so enchanted by this book. Like I could not stop reading it. I could not stop thinking about all the characters and their life and their story, and there is actually a TV series based on this book, and I finished season 1, I ripped through it. It's very emotional, very heavy, so I haven't watched season 2 yet, but I'm very excited to do so. Essentially what this book is before I even go into that in more detail. So it follows the journey of this family that's originally from Korea all the way to Japan, which is where they end up, and it goes through the generations of the family. So kind of like the grandmother to her children to her grandchildren, and following all of their stories like all at once, essentially. It is just written so beautifully. I cried multiple times throughout this book. There are so many things that I never knew. Like I learned so much about history and people and differences in culture and stuff like that. And it was just like, it was perfect. Like I actually have no notes about this, and I watched the show and it's in Korean, so obviously there's subtitles, which is another reason why I didn't want to start season 2 yet, because it's one of those shows you have to be like fully present because you have to read the subtitles. So I need to kind of like let my like personal life circumstances like settle down a little bit to where I can fully be into it. But it was so good. Like I thought about these characters, and I still do, like nonstop. And it was just so amazing, and I would definitely recommend it. It has 4.34 stars on Goodreads, so a lot of people really liked it. But it was just like, I never thought I would love a book like this because it's so different than what I normally read, but it was amazing. So that was my best book of 2024 is Pachinko. Watch the show, it was amazing also. A lot of times when people make a movie or a show based on a book, it doesn't translate as well, but this one actually was done very well, so I really liked it. And that wraps up all of the best books that I read in 2024. I loved making this video. I love like oversharing and chit-chatting through all the books that I loved. There were a lot of books that I read that kind of fell into like the mediocre category. Like they were good enough that I would recommend them, but they weren't great, but they weren't horrible. So all of those books are on my Goodreads if you want to check it out. I also share all of my ratings on my Instagram, so you guys can, you know, follow me on Instagram if you want to keep up with like my regular ratings, which don't make it to this video. If you want me to make like a full video of all of the books that I've read, I could do that too at the end of next year. Or if you want me to break it up and do like quarterly things, we could do that. One of my goals in life is to have a big enough following where we could do a book club, like a virtual book club. And so I'm working my way towards that. I have a very small space on the internet, and I hope to be bigger one day where we could do kind of like a book club type of thing. If you have any suggestions on books that you think I would like based on everything you've heard me talk about so far, please let me know. I'm so excited to again keep reading in 2025, and I haven't set a Goodreads goal yet, but I'm thinking 45, considering I have finished 39 to 40 in 2024, and so 45 seems like a crazy number because I literally like have a full-time job, like I do things like YouTube outside of work, like where do I find the time? But I actually end up reading every single day, like even if it's a chapter, and so I'm really excited to keep on doing that. It has kept me sane essentially this entire year. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.